Uh, Come on in the room. Come on in this room, people. Come on in this room. Happy Monday. Happy Monday. This is the Damien Jones podcast. Come on in the room, people. I changed today's topic, kind of spur of the moment here. We were going to talk about stocks today, but my guest got sick. Andrea got sick, and he called me. He said, Damien, I cannot come on today. Not feeling well. So I changed the topic, but I think we landed on a pretty good topic to talk about today. So come on in the room, Damien Jones podcast. Share this broadcast, like this broadcast right now. Tag some people who want to get in this conversation today. And I want to hear from you. We have a great guest, but we also going to take some calls today from you all. And so you see the call in number that is on the screen. Our call-in number. We're going to open the lines up in a little bit, but I want to hear your thoughts on this topic. 832-224-3348, Damien Jones podcast. Today, we're going to talk about where should these Confederate monuments go once we remove them? Where should they go? We'll be speaking in a moment with historian, African-American culture historian, Ms. Naomi Mitchell-Carrier from the Texas Center for African-American Living History. So like this broadcast right now, share this broadcast. Hope you had a great weekend. I am so happy to be with you. So blessed that you can be with us again to just continue to talk about the things that are important to our community as well. So come on in the room on this blessed Monday. We can have a good lunchtime chat about where should these Confederate monuments go. So go ahead and like this broadcast, share this broadcast. As well as we get people coming into the room. We're going to open the phone lines up in about 15 to 20 minutes. But please give me your comments. What do you think? Where should these monuments go? Should they be destroyed? Should they go to museums? Should activists go out and just destroy them anyway? I don't know. But give me your thoughts in the comments today. As we're talking, as you're coming into the room, make sure you visit our website, I am Damien Jones, and register to vote, people. Register to vote. It is so important that we register to vote. And then we also have to make sure we get to the polls. There are runoff elections coming up. There are primaries still happening across the country as well. So come on in the room for a good lunchtime chat as it relates to what we do with these Confederate monuments. Hey, I also got an opportunity for somebody to win some money today. So I'm giving $50. I'm going to put this down in the comments right now as you all come on into the room. $50 goes to a lucky person who fills out this survey for me today. I want to know your thoughts on this upcoming election, who you're going to vote for. It's an anonymous survey, but by completing this survey, enter your information, you enter to get $50 as well. So come on in the room. Want to know your thoughts? Also, don't forget to complete the census as well. So we're here. We're going to hear from Ms. Naomi Mitchell Carrier in just a moment. But happy Monday, y'all. Happy Monday. Feeling out this. Go ahead and tag some people real quick. We're going to take off in just a minute. Go ahead and tag some people in just a moment. We're going to take off in just a moment. I hope y'all like my new background. I made some adjustments. I've been listening to y'all's feedback. Damien, I hate your background. Got all this crap going on. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so I gave you a better background. Tell me how you like the new background. Okay? American flag right there in your face. So put that there. Come on in the room. Come on in the room. Come on in the room. What should we do with these Confederate monuments? So you see the comments. Hey, fill out that survey. Whoever fills out that survey, you enter to win $50. I know that can be helpful to somebody right now as well. Make sure you are following our Facebook page, Damien Jones Podcast. You can understand and know when we go live each and every time. We're always broadcasting every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 12:30 Central. I also want to remind you, this is Juneteenth, the week of Juneteenth. So we're going to bring you some great discussions this week as it relates to Juneteenth. And also Father's Day is Sunday. So you have no excuse. I'm telling you now, go ahead and start getting your gifts together. Don't wait till Friday or Saturday to get your dad or your father figure some type of gift as well. But also, before we start today's conversation, I just want to have a moment of silence for our dear brother, Rayshard Brooks, who was murdered in Atlanta over the weekend by Atlanta PD. And so it just continues to show why we need reform in our police departments across the board. So just a moment of silence. And thankful to the Atlanta community for continuing to lift their voice in his name. But just a moment of silence really quickly for our brother, Rayshard Brooks. So continue to like, come on, give me a like. This is your first time watching this broadcast. Like it right now. If you are a regular viewer, give me a heart button right now. If you like this broadcast, tell us something in the comments, but let's take off. Let's lift. I see some people coming into the room. Tag people that want to hear this conversation. This is going to be good today. So let's talk about it. Where should these Confederate monuments go? You know, you got, I'm from Jackson, Mississippi. So I always saw this Confederate flag always flying around, reminding us of the history of the Confederacy, the Civil War, and they fought to preserve slavery. They fought to preserve the enslavement and oppression of Black persons. The Civil War continues to remind us. Our history books are filled with these stories. And so the conversation has continued over throughout time. Who won, who lost. And now these conversations have continued. And many folks are saying we need to remove the symbols of hatred, of bigotry, of oppression in our community. And the other pockets of people say we need to preserve it because we need to know our history. And so I think the reason why we're bringing this conversation forward, because here in Houston, recently, across the country, we are seeing Confederate monuments being removed in Norfolk, Virginia, in Jacksonville, Florida, in Birmingham, Alabama, in Tennessee. We're seeing monuments of Robert E. Lee, Jefferson Davis, Dick Dowling, and other folks removed because communities are tired. Communities don't want to be reminded of such a thing. But the question is, once you remove these monuments, what do you do with them? What should you do with those monuments? And so let me bring in my friend here today from the Texas Center for African American Living History is Miss Naomi Mitchell Carrier. Miss Carrier, how are you? And welcome to the Damien Jones podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm well, and I am honored to be your guest today.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you had time to join us today.
Well, I can never turn down an opportunity to educate.
Right. I'm glad about that. How do I try to share this thing? 1 second.
Will I be able to share a document or no?
If it has a link, you can put it down in the comments, if possible.
Oh, and so I can put it in the chat.
Yeah, you put it down in the chat. Okay. So I brought Miss Carrier on to kind of get a better understanding about what we should do with these monuments, what they mean, why they are on display, why they are coming down, and what we should do with them. Now, we know that these monuments are in the National African American Museum in D.C. We know that there are some reminders of slavery, reminders of Jim Crow, reminders of oppression in that um, museum. But also, and Miss Carey is going to come back in just a second. But recently, Mayor Turner and a task force decided take down, as I bring her back in, to take down the spirit of the Confederacy monument here in the city of Houston, and
Mm-hmm.
also take down a monument of Dick Dowling as well, that reminds many of hatred, of oppression, of bigotry in this country, particularly in the state of Texas. And so, and I'm coming to you in just a second, Ms. Carey, but let me just say this as we start. Listen, there's a lot going on in terms of racial oppression and racial intensity right now in this country. And I think sometimes we have righteous rage, but sometimes I think sometimes we mad just to be mad, right? And let me just say this. I think we got to give Mayor Turner a lot of credit here in the city of Houston for taking down these monuments. And I know some of you in the comments may not agree with me when it comes to this, but I think we got to give him a lot of credit, because nobody before him took these monuments down. Nobody before him. These monuments have been up for years and years, and nobody before him took them down. And if you read the report, because people, we got to read, we look at headlines, but we don't read the full thing. If we read the report, the decision in terms of the city of Houston, the decision to remove these monuments was made in 2018, 2017, in a response to what happened in Charlottesville, Virginia, and in response to what happened in Charleston, South Carolina. And so the mayor listened to those calls and put together a task force, and they decided to remove these monuments. And so now I think the uproar now comes, the timing, and they decided to give the monuments to the Houston Museum of African American Culture, and folks are in an uproar and they don't understand the logic about that. I'm open to hearing the logic. I want to know, because I don't understand the thinking. But Miss Carey, let me go to you first and foremost. What do these Confederate statues resemble in your mind, and what do they resemble?
First of all, let's back up to the Articles of Secession
Okay.
that were promoted in February of 1861, when Texas became the seventh star of the Confederacy. What these monuments represent is a whole army, a whole party that decided to go against the Union, making them traitors of the first rank. They were traitors. They were against our Union, and the monuments themselves did not appear until uh, after 1900, when it was necessary to sow political fear into another generation. We didn't need the monuments directly after the Civil War, because those enslaved people knew that who were already inculcated with a politics of fear and a whole culture of violence against them. So they were afraid. So you didn't have to sow fear into them. But by 1930, when another generation had arose with a little bit more spunk in the act, the audacity to sass a white person, or not get off the sidewalk if a white person was walking through. Well, we're gonna have to, and I will ask your listening audience to pardon me for the use of the word, what we call the N word, but I am not ashamed to use the N word, because I know where it comes from. Number one, it doesn't refer to any country nor any culture. It is a word that was used to define us for over 250 years, to help us to understand that we are nothing. We don't belong to a country. We don't have a culture. So then these monuments were meant to sow fear into another generation of what the Confederacy calls niggers. Okay, and they also began to be installed in public places to show black people that you need to praise us, you need to give us reverence, even though we were traitors, even though we sold the cotton that you picked in the hot sun to buy guns and ammunitions to keep you enslaved. And then we used you on our battlefront to build bridges and fortifications and keep the home fires burning while our boys went off to fight in the Civil War to keep you enslaved. And so it is necessary to have these monuments in public places to keep black people, niggers, we're gonna have to show these niggas that they're getting out of line. We're gonna have to keep these niggas in their places because they getting too powerful. And so they throw up these monuments during the same period of time that lynching was prevalent between 1900 and 1930, when they were probably lynching one black person every day.
Every day.
A politics of fear. And while I'm on that, just let me say this. In Texas, when the Civil War was over, it was not over in Texas. It wasn't over because the South refused to accept a defeat. They're still refusing to accept a defeat. And they're throwing up these Robert E. Lee, Jefferson Davis monuments in places where they don't belong, in public places. Yeah, they probably do need to give some of them to black museums. Let me interpret that story. You see, when you don't have the material culture, the slave cabin or the Confederate monument, then there's no thing by which you may tell the story. So some of them may need to be kept because they are indicative of a period of history that although it be a bygone past, it is still prevalent today.
So let me say this, and you are in your bag right now. You are cooking with some hot grease right now, because folks are really loving you in the comments for what you're bringing to the table. And so you just made a good point. On the one hand, I'm seeing some people in the comments saying we need to throw these monuments in the trash. They need to be at the bottom of the ocean. We want to remember nothing about this time in history. We need to erase it. This is not something that our people need to remember. It drags down our psyche. It puts us in a place of inferiority. We need to get rid of it, right? But then on the other hand, I'm hearing from what you just said as a historian, maybe we need to preserve some of these hate field, oppression field type of monuments. Kind of talk about what you mean by, hey, maybe we need to hold on to some of them.
Well, first of all, nobody can make you feel inferior. That is a self-internalization, and you must never feel that. And by the way, any people who can be the survivors of the fittest, people who were chained in the bottom of a ship for 2 months and sold and sold and sold and resold, are not inferior. They might just be superior.
Come on, mother.
Okay. So some of these monuments that are in public places that my tax dollars are supporting, I don't want to see them in the Capitol, on the Capitol grounds in Austin, Texas. But more importantly than taking down Confederate monuments is building up black monuments. Okay,
Yes,
I want a
yes.
monument to Dory Miller in Waco. I want the story of Jesse Washington told. Okay, Dory Miller was the black seaman who took hold of a machine gun on December the 7th, 1941, when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. And Dory Miller took charge of a machine gun and mowed down a few of the enemy. I want to see a monument to him. I want to see a monument to Jesse Washington, who, according to Ida B. Wells, is the most horrible lynching on record. He was killed 5 times. He was shot. He was beat. He was hung. He was lifted up and down out of the fire. We get upset. We got the world upset because a policeman had his racist knee on somebody's neck. How does it feel if old Uncle Tom dies and somebody tells you to stick a pitchfork in him and feed him to the pigs? How does it feel if people had their ears cut off and their fingers cut off one by one? How does it feel to be a grown man and to get whipped? You know what Sarah Ford said, who was a slave on the one of the plantations in Brazoria County, the patent place. She said when it was freed, she says, the bright light done come and there's no more whippings. And many of the ex-slave, I hope I'm not getting too far off your topic. Many of the
No.
ex-slave narratives speak of whippings. You see, that was how you generate more industry from slaves. You got somebody riding around on a horse with a gun and a whip. Was very prevalent during the period of convict leasing. Number one, you can be free unless you convicted. So we done convicted you. And if you try to get away, I'm going to shoot you in the back because you are going to be worked to death. Okay, this is America is a culture of violence, a culture of death.
Wait. Hold on, Miss Carey. Hold on. One second. Hold that heat. Let me just tell y'all, I switched my top. We were going to talk about stocks today. My guest called me and said, I'm sick. I can't do it. I literally just called Miss Carrier 5 minutes before we got on the air. We've never met before. I just called her 5 minutes and I said, Miss Carrier, can you come on online with me and talk about this topic? And she said, yes, send me the link. And here we are with this heat. So let's brace ourselves, number one. Number two, share this broadcast, because we're about to take off and go to a whole nother place with this thing. Share this broadcast. Hit the share button right now. Tag somebody who needs to hear this conversation, because we need more people in the room to hear this greatness. I see one of the comments says, we are not ready for her. Yeah, arguably we ain't, but we're going to get it today. We're going to get this work. We're going to get this education today as it relates to our history. Listen, Juneteenth is around the corner. We are going through some very, very tough times in this country as it relates to race relations. And so we need to talk about our history. We need to talk about uplifting one another. But it starts with these type of conversations. So bring more people in the room right now. Damien Jones podcast, as we talk with historian Naomi Mitchell Carrier about what we do with these Confederate monuments and our history. You just mentioned something a minute ago, Ms. Carrier, and maybe there's a correlation, maybe there isn't. And we've been having these conversations around policing in the country, starting with slave patrols and that type of ethic, right? And you just mentioned a minute ago how slaves were shot in the back as they ran away. And we just saw a video over the weekend where a young black man who was just trying to get back home to his family, celebrate his daughter's birthday, was shot in the back as he ran away by Atlanta PD. Do you think there's some connection between how police are policing now in the correlation to slave patrols and the slave culture and how we've been treated for 400 years?
The police are only needed in a culture where you have to continue oppression. And I would say to your question, absolutely. This whole business of how you keep a people oppressed, how you immerse them in a politics of fear is about controlling Black people. Now in the Constitution, and Reverend Dr. William Barber speaks about this. In Virginia, when they were coming up with some of the language for the Constitution, they permitted the slave states to organize statewide militias. Why did they even need a statewide militia? That is the genesis of Amendment 2, the right to bear arms. Why do we need so many guns? What are you afraid of? You know, what is this savage that has been born in these police departments who maybe was trained on the American military battlefields, and now you want to come and use that same aggression against me? When if a World War I or World War II black veteran who was called and went to service, you came home and wore a uniform, you could be shot in the back too. So this uptick in murder, in need to control black people is because these niggas have gotten too powerful. They have gotten out of their place. They don't respect white people anymore. And besides, white people don't know us. They don't want
What do
to.
you? Yeah. What do you mean by that? They don't know us. What does that mean? What does that
They
mean? Talk to
they
me.
they they, they don't. Number one, they don't have to ever be in our company. You know, why I say they don't know us is because it has been too many cases of black people killed because they made some white person uncomfortable.
Mm. We continue to see those. We continue to see those type of
They
situations.
don't know us. They dance to our music. They copy our language. They sit out in the sun. They want brown skin. They want curly hair, but they don't know us. Because if they did know us, the resilience they've seen in us to survive would
Mm.
prohibit them from calling us inferior.
Right.
So
Right.
you
Right.
can take these monuments, you can share them with some of the black museums. John Guest is a very we work together. John and I are just like this. We work together because we're in the same business of educating people about our history and culture. Yeah, some of them take them over to some black music, but more importantly, what I want black people to know is put your money together and raise your own monument. You don't need Texas Historical Commission or the National anything. If you want to honor somebody, doggone it, honor them.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
Honor them.
So you so, so
You know what
you
slaves did that we had no resources to make monuments or build. They planted a tree.
and
I'm
what
not.
did that symbolize?
This is how I mark my relative's grave with a tree. You know, I don't have a cross. I don't have. I don't. We didn't have time. We didn't even have time to bury him. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And don't give him too much space because he's taking up too much of master's land, and this land is not for niggas. It's for cotton.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry to be so raw.
No, listen, I called you. You answered the call. So please be as authentic and organic as possible because America is raw. Our experience has been raw. You know, so we need to have these raw conversations. Listen, there's no point of tiptoeing around it and those type of things. But let me ask you this. What is it? And so if I want to, me and my wife want to go for a brisk walk in the park one day, we want to go somewhere, it's a nice day and hold hands and eat some food. And I don't want to use the word have a picnic because we know what that derived from, and so we want to sit down and just have a meal, right? But as you walk your families through these places and you see these Confederate monuments, Robert E. Lee, Jefferson Davis, Dick Dowling, and a whole host of others, talk about the mental impact on the psyche of an African American when you see these type of monuments constantly in these public spaces. Take your time. Take your time.
Yeah, this is heavy. One of the chapters in my book that I just finished during the time I've been quarantined since the 1st of March it has been on my plate for the past 10 years, and I finished the research in 2014 at the Gregory Library as a Rice Scholar. I finally had that book was
Mm-hmm,
so
mm-hmm.
heavy on me for several years, and the funny thing about research is you're never done. There are always some more pieces to the puzzle, but the point I want to make is it was so heavy until I finally took the time I didn't take the time. I was imposed into quarantine, and that was how I got through it. One of my 12 chapters is on trauma. And I
Uh-huh.
want to thank Dr. Joy DeGruy, who I isolated this whole term of post-traumatic slave syndrome. Somebody say it's not post-traumatic; it's present traumatic. But point is that, and this is her example. If you were around on the day of 9/11 and you witnessed what happened and how horrific it was and the loss of bodies, etc., that could leave you with a form of post-traumatic stress. I mean, golly, you just saw some people get blew up,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know. But the most recent brain research says that we intuit in our mental DNA memory across generations, and there's more than enough research on how that happens, which is how black people have managed to bridge their culture from Africa to America. What's similar about it? How come we sing and dance? How do we repair ourselves? How do we save ourselves from going crazy if we don't sing and dance? If I can't sing a song that's my own song, and damn it, it's not your song, it's my song. Okay, so it's my song, and I can sing it when I. But the point is, we have to empower ourselves not to put our children on the battleground without any ammunition.
Ooh,
And they
come on,
don't
come on.
know, they don't know who and what we are. And it's too bad that in order for me to wake some people up, I got to go all the way down there, because a lot of people say, like, wait, I don't want to discuss it uh because it hurts too much. My parents never talked to me about slavery. They talked to me about a lot of stuff, but they didn't
Hmm.
get into no raping and but you know what they did? They always, and I don't care where you are, black parents give a talk to their kids when they're getting to be in puberty, when they getting ready to separate from the family and go out into the community and maybe on a bus downtown, and they be telling you that, don't you be going down there, don't you be go-. See, I grew up in a segregated community. I couldn't go to
Where
the
you
city.
from? Where you from? Where you from?
Wichita Falls, Texas is where I grew up. I was
Okay.
born in the valley, 20 miles north of the Rio Grande River. And
Okay.
that colors my history too. But they would tell her, don't be going down there acting up, don't get them white folk on us, and don't be, you know how to say yes ma'am, no thank you ma'am. Get your black ass out of these white people's way so you don't be
Well,
causing us to have no problem. Don't be no Emmett Till out here.
Miss Carey, let me jump in. Damien Jones podcast, talking with great historian Naomi Mitchell Carey about what we should do with these Confederate monuments and the impact that it's having on our community, our psyche, as well. Listen, we want to hear from y'all. I want to open the phone lines up. Give me a call, 832-224-3348, and just give us your brief thoughts on what we should do with these monuments, or if you have a historical question for Miss Carrier. But call in, give me your first name, but just don't curse. My mom watches this show as well. And so, you mentioned that you are good friends with Mr. Guest over at the Houston Museum of African American Culture, and they said we want this particular statue. The city of Houston, they said we want this statue, the spirit of the Confederacy. We want it. Don't destroy it. We want it. Bring it here. And again, I'm open to hearing what the logic is, because it could be something good. So in your thoughts, and your Mr. Guest, history, museums and how they operate. Just tell us what could be the logic and the thinking as to why a African American museum would say, "Don't destroy this hateful statue. We'll take it."
Number one, and I will go back to the Articles of Secession for
Mm-hmm.
Texas. If you read those Articles of Secession, they will tell you why they separated from the Union, because they did not want, and I wanted to share the document with you, but I don't want to mess up my connection. Um, this the Texans said that this country was made by white folks for white people, and the only way that the black people would have anything to do with it is that they were being beneficent and that they were being utilized. But they are in no way equal to white people, because it's ungodly, it's not natural, and God did not deny that. But then what you have to understand is that when a colonizer, and we talking Christopher Columbus now, when you colonize a people, for them to be fully colonized and under your control, you have to take from them their perception of God. Animals don't need God. Animals don't pray. Animals don't have church.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the message at Reedy Chapel AME Church this Sunday. Uh, in 1848, a lot was purchased so black people would have a place to worship. Why do they need to worship? Why do we need to celebrate emancipation? We cannot celebrate emancipation without a conversation about slavery.
Mm-hmm.
I the human body can only endure so much oppression, so
Yes.
much
Yes.
trauma. You know, I went through a period after I was working with the Convict Leasing and Labor Project, which was a very worthy project, testified in Austin at the legislature 3 times behind trying to secure a proper memorialization of 95 people, Sugarland 95.
Ooh, yes,
I
yes,
still
yes.
don't know where they are. Why can't I come? Why can't I go there and sit under a memorial beside a fountain and honor them? Okay, that's what I call a memorial. Okay, why do the people who were the traitors to the Union that over 200,000 black people helped save, why do they get to have all the monuments in the state house?
Mm-hmm.
You know, but I'm not interested in any monuments. I don't need any monuments. I don't need any more certificates. I am interested in saving my children. We need a generation of children that will be able to go forward after this period. And I think that's what the young people are doing. They're saying, like, I don't want to live in a country where I can get shot in the back for buying a popsicle or riding a bike or jogging, or what kind of trauma does that put into a 3 or 4 or 5 year old who wants to grow up to become an adult?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let me just say, Miss Carey, I brought in my good friend Dr. Marlon Smith. I don't know if you know Dr. Smith, uh, but he
I
is a
will after today.
right. So Dr. Smith, we're just having a conversation around these Confederate statues, our history, as we talk about Juneteenth, and all of those things. But y'all, let me pause really quickly for station identification and thank our sponsors. Hey, do you want to keep people away from you when you are sick? Have you ever wanted to self-isolate and people just won't stop bothering you? Well, I have the perfect solution, my friends. SorryIamSick.com has great gear and great products that all of you can wear and isolate in style. T-shirts, mugs, socks, you name it, they have it. So I encourage you to visit sorryIamSick.com. for your apparel needs. Thank you to sorryIamsick.com for sponsoring today's incredible and important conversation. Dr. Smith, hop in here, kind of talk to us about, I know you on limited time, what we should do with these Confederate statues.
I mean, it depends on the leadership. So you ask, what should we do with them? I mean, it depends on who you're asking and what the purpose is for. If the purpose is to utilize those Confederate statues to tell a more accurate history of our collective group of people, Black, white, Hispanic, Native American, then to me, you have to bring all those groups together to have that conversation. I think the problem is there's not a thought around how we're going to think about these statues as a collective group. We are just simply have people responding to social outrage around the presence of them there, right? Mm-hmm. And so it seems to me the first thing that there has to be an admission of, wherever that statue is to say, why was it first even created, right? Mm. Like there's never a conversation about, well, under this statue, we'll place a plaque to say that this statue was to serve as a type of social, kind of like an iconic reminder of the terror under which white people will then govern Black bodies in this space, right? Like, so in South Carolina or Texas, part of what those statues were initially created to was to remind Black people of the ways in which white society would utilize its power to leverage control over the policing of Black bodies, whether that's we're talking about right now, coming up on Juneteenth, talking about Greenwood and other places like that. Not just Greenwood and Rosewood, but we had that in Houston. We've had that in places like Dallas and East Texas. So what do we do with them? We have to find means to reverse engineer the reason for their construction in the first place.
Let me ask you this. Do you think, and Ms. Carey, you hop in here too on this one, could it also, when we send them to an African-American museum, a lot of folks are in uproar about that, and they feel it's very disrespectful. They think that, with the oppression and terror that we have experienced, those things need to be disintegrate into the annals of nothingness. But could it also be seen as a way to reclaim your power and turn such terror and negativity on its head and use it for good? Is that a possibility?
I mean, it is a possibility, but you can't reclaim something for a group of people if you haven't invited those people to be a part of the reclamation process. So in other words, you can't enforce on me what we're going to reclaim, because if you go to Black people, for instance, Black people may say, well, that's not something that we want to reclaim. That is actually something that we want to dismantle, right? Mm-hmm. But by not going to Black people before you do that, then what you're doing is then yet again imposing onto Black people how you will police and navigate the spaces that we occupy. So I think, once again, you can't ask what to do with something that has been socially constructed to terrorize Black people if you're not asking Black people first before you do it.
Yeah. Ms. Carey, hop in there on this one. Can it be used for good? Can you take your power back? Can it turn on its head to be something, a positive sign? In your thoughts? And I see you smirking. And let me have it.
Well, Dave, first of all, it's a pleasure to speak with you and have your ideas too, Marlon. I think that's what Damien is doing. He is taking it to the people. He is wanting to know how people feel. I mean, a lot of people go to HMAC, for example. Somebody may not want to run up in there and look at Robert E. Lee. But what we have to, and this is to your point also, Marlon, what we have to remember is that history is not made in isolation. To take these monuments down and not use them for an opportunity to re-educate Okay. It's just like I go to a plantation and I see no reference to any quarters. I see that I have been completely removed from the premises of Varna Hog Plantation, except for a few bricks over there and some sugar kettles. So when you remove something, we call it material culture, then you don't have that item, that statue, that plaque to help you tell the story. And what's more important than the statues and etc., it is the interpretation of the statues and the plaques. What is this saying here? You know?
Yeah. What I was thinking, listen, I've been racking my brain. Dr. Smith, we were on the phone when I first read about the article, and you and I were talking about it a little bit, and I said, chew on this a little bit. But I'm thinking, hey, you know what? They're going to put it in the museum. Let me imagine what the exhibit could be, what the exhibit could be named. And I said to myself, the exhibit should be named The Vicious Races of Texas, right? And you talk about re-educate, then let's re-educate, because these statues have been, as folks said in the comments, a place of glorification, an icon, a figure. So let's re-educate, especially as we approach Juneteenth. Let's re-educate people on who these people really were, because we've been lying to ourselves. We've been lying to people as to what they have done, who they were, and the contributions that they've given to our state and to our country. So let's re-educate and have a total exhibit for all to see. Racists, oppressors, and sometimes murderers of Texas. Would that be a fair exhibit?
Well, I have problems with the name of it.
Okay.
What we have got to remember here is the reconciliation and the healing aspect of everything we do going forward, because not only the nation but the world and the state and people that you know and that I know, people are troubled now. They're hurting inside and they need some so I would most and I love your idea about the potential for exhibits, because but I would name it something more like what our theme is for our call this Saturday, our Juneteenth call, from rejection to resurrection. It is important that we resurrect our historical memory, and that we do it in such a way that it is healing for Black people, for white people, for every people, for the earth, for so many issues, for educating our children. We don't want to bring our children up in a world where they have to be afraid, or they don't want to even go out of the house, don't want to go outside because I might get shot. I mean, what is that? What is it like to feel like that?
Right. So Damien Jones podcast, talking with Dr. Marlon Smith and Ms. Naomi Carrier. Dr. Smith, I know you got to go. So I'm asking this last question. You can tip out. Get back to your scholarly activities. But and Ms. Carrier kind of talked about it a little bit before you came on the show. What can we do to use these symbols, these monuments, as a place of healing? How can we heal, in your view? So, is it possible to use these symbols as a place of healing, in your view?
So part of what that suggests to me is that we want to reconfigure those symbols from being, metaphors for stations of terror to being tools for reconciliation, using Ms. Carrier's words, for reconciliation. Well, part of reconciliation, I think about this from a theological point. So in Christian theology, we often talk about that reconciliation first requires a type of repentance, and repentance is a type of acknowledgement of the things that were done, so that we might know exactly what we're healing and what we're repenting of. So if you think about these pieces as these monuments as more than just instruments of signifiers for terror, but also positions of art, then art to understand art is to understand the location of art, right? So that when we have art, the where it is placed tells us much about what it is trying to do. There's a reason why many of these statues that we see across Confederate states, former Confederate states, were placed in the center of towns, which was now what we know about downtown. It is because
the town center.
Yeah, the town center. So that when you move throughout the that space, you understand what that art is trying to say because of where that space is located. Part of the thing that I think that happens is, for instance, when we move certain Confederate statues that were initially created to kind of remind Black people of the terror of whiteness in that space, then really all we did was relocated that and kind of perpetuated that terror. What we never really, so we put it in a Black space, in other words, to remind Black people of our terror, right? As opposed to saying within that space where it is, how do we reconfigure it as a way of shaming it, as a way of reimagining our role and our participation with it. So, because that's not the only symbol that we have. I'll tell you, once again, I go back to the work that I do. The one of the first and most prolific symbols of terror that we have in the state of Texas is the prison. Those prisons are symbols of terror. They were positioned and placed in certain places. And if you go to Huntsville, there's a museum for the history of prison in Texas, right? So really what is not done is that we have not reconfigured those monuments, those icons, those symbols in a way that shames them so that they become iconic reminders of how we were wronged, how Black bodies were killed and lynched, and the way in which Black lives lived under a system of terror. And they're not placed in those spaces, particularly for white people. Because white people love those symbols, because when you ask white people about the Confederate flag and all these other things, they don't think of those narratives, right? They think of a whole bunch of other things that are really conditioned because of something that Miss Carrier also said that that I think you need to remember, is that in the resurrection of those monuments, like those statues, these buildings, was also the intentional erasure of Black death and Black culture. So when they did that, for instance, I'll go back again, since Greenwood is so prevalent to some of the conversations that we've been talking about in popular culture right now, is when they did away with Black Wall Street in Greenwood in Oklahoma, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the first thing that they did was erase every venture of terror that took place there, and then put those bodies in unmarked graves so that there was no longer a reminder to white people about the terror that they inflicted on Black people, which put Black people into type of a spiritual and mental psychosis, because we no longer have within us, as Ms. Carrier talked about, any type of material or physical culture that is trying to help explain the terror under which we continue to exist, but cannot point to anything about, right? So we have to reimagine all of that stuff so that we can remind other people of the terror that we're in, so we can stop sounding crazy to white people, because white people think we sound crazy when we say why we don't wish to call the police, or why we're constantly being terrorized or harassed, or why racism still exists. Because as far as they're concerned, there's no more symbols, no more material culture, no more physical traits that outline that. And where we do place them, like in an African American History Museum, they're not going to that place in the first place. So they don't get reminded or being called into account for that. But I say, let's put them in white places and reconfigure and reimagine them to shame whiteness around the way in which it has terrorized Black people, so that we might then readjust how we go forward in the way we talk about our history.
Thank you for putting that into words. You need to write it up, because
in a book. It's in a book.
Oh, I love it.
He has plenty of those. And so yeah, Dr. Smith, thank you for that heat. Oh, thank you for that heat.
That was beautiful.
I know you gotta go. But Yeah, but thank you, and we'll talk later this week, man. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Um, so wow, Dr. Smith just kind of laid that out, and I really like some of those points, like where our culture, any remnants of the terror that they have in placed upon us has been erased, and so
Yeah.
new generations of white people have no idea
No,
about
I mean,
some of his terror.
you go to a plantation, you can have a wedding there, you can have a workshop, take a tour.
Yeah.
We gone.
Yeah.
But let me tell you what happened when I went to Monticello
Okay. Monticello
and
in Virginia, right?
Thomas Jefferson's hangout.
Yeah. Right.
We It was a UNESCO conference in 2018 to reframe the interpretation, new approaches for interpreting slavery, and I was there with a number of my colleagues, and the second evening of the 3-day conference, we were taken up the hill on a bus to Monticello, a couple of
Mm-hmm.
buses, I think it was, and they had a reception for the conferees. And Kathy Hambrick, the founder of the River Road African American Museum, who is my sister for the past 20-25 years, she said, we want to go to Mulberry Row. We want to, before we leave this base, we want to go to the quarters. And so we were taken on a tour there, and by now it's about 9 o'clock in the evening. It is freezing cold. It is predicted to freeze the next day and shut everything down, but by
Mm-hmm.
now it's already about 32 degrees, and I'm wearing some cute little old brown leather suit that is not doing anything for me. And so we go on Mulberry Row, and we begin to pray, and each of us in our own individual ways were depending on your level of purity,
Mm-hmm.
were immersed by the Holy Spirits of the ancestors. And so I'm standing there and I'm talking in tongues and I'm praying and and we're all kind of like mesmerized. And this lady, who I found out later was a descendant of Sally Hemings, she touched me on the elbow and she said, her room is right over there. And I looked at her and she said, I'll take you there. I'll take you there when we're done. And when we were done, she led me over to Sally Hemings' room, which was still undergoing archaeological inspection, investigate. Wonder why they were in there. So anyway, I go and I slip myself into the room without being seen, while the others were preparing to leave. And Sally Hemings actually talked to me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not going to say it was weird because I had been knowing about Sally Hemings since I was a little girl. My father was an educated man, and he told me about Thomas Jefferson and them, and he told me what was happening to Sally Hemings in that room, where all of a sudden, after all these years, I'm in her room. And so, if her room had not been there,
Mm-hmm.
that's all I'm saying. If Mulberry Row had not still been there,
Right.
and the fact that the statues are in public places, I so like what Marlon was saying, is that we have got to, and this is probably the last thing I need to say, we have got to reframe how we interpret history. We have to reframe how we interpret these statues. We have to reframe how we educate people. And believe me, technology is one of our equalizers, because were it not for Darnella Frazier and her had her cell phone, it was charged up, and
Mm-hmm.
and she had the um um she wasn't nervous when she took that video. for 8 minutes and 46 seconds that she held that video camera. She
Right,
might have been
right.
mesmerized. She was also traumatized.
Yes.
We traumatized. So she's the eyewitness.
So let me ask you this. As we talk about this conversation with Naomi Carrier from the Texas Center for African American Living History, about these monuments in our history as we approach Juneteenth, as we talk about our history, we've talked about the negativity of those monuments, but how do we move to a place and what can we do to begin to get some monuments of African American heroes and icons of greatness, of resilience? Yeah, I'd love to go to a park and
Thanks
see
for
some.
asking.
Yeah, we're gonna get there, right? It's a whole story. So
Yeah.
when you go into these parks, I want to take a walk in the park and have the dog running around, and I want to look up and see a black monument of some sort. You know, our children can kind of marvel at and say, "Mom, Dad, who is so and so person?" How do we get to that place? What do we need to do? What are the steps so we can lift up our culture and have those symbols that we can remember of greatness in our community?
You have not because you ask not.
Yeah.
We must demand. We
Mm-hmm.
must demand permanent repair of what has happened to us. And who has the money? The government. The government has the money because they worked us for 250 years.
Mm-hmm.
This government has not repaired. They have not paid for the cornerstone to capitalism. When the war was over, they didn't want us to have anything. William Tecumseh Sherman, whose order it was that the people following his soldiers could have 40 acres and a mule from what all along the eastern seaboard. When they got 40,000 people settled on those lands, they got the crop in, and that was around like what, December or so. They got the crop in. This is the Juneteenth story too.
Mm-hmm.
They got the crop in that spring, and then by then, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated on April the 14th or 15th of 1864, after he was inaugurated and sworn. By the time we got the news, the General Order number 3, that we were emancipated, Abraham Lincoln was dead.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew Johnson had already stepped in his shoes and was telling the planters along the eastern seaboard he forgave them and told them they could have their land back. And then when they go in there to take their land back, and the black people got some guns, and they're like, "No, we've been on our knees. You ain't getting this back."
So you're saying we need to call our mayors, we need to call our state legislators, we
Call
need to call
everybody.
our governors, city council persons, and say, hey, let us start preserving African American history. And as we remove these racist symbols and statues, they need to be replaced with bastions of hope, of greatness, of positivity, of resilience in our community. Is that what you're saying?
Including tolerance programs, racism forum, and tolerance programs involving performance art and what I call living history interpretation, because we got to bring it to people's faces that we need to heal from this. And the thing I like so much about what Marlon said is, if we can reframe how we use these monuments for teaching, they need to be maybe put on in special places on the campuses of universities where students can learn uh, uh, where this comes from and what it represents, and what can it represent now.
Yeah. Last question, and I'll let you go. Damien Jones podcast. Hey, y'all, give us a like. Miss Carrier has been giving us some great information. If you appreciate this educational information, give us a like right now. or just tell us in the comments, thank you, Miss Carrier, for this information that she's given us on a whim. Called her 5 minutes before we came online, and she has blessed us tremendously. And as I talk about that really quickly, on Saturday, join me and my friend Miss Carrier for a conversation with the Pearland MLK Celebration Committee, for a conversation about rejection to resurrection as well. So you can look on my Facebook page, and we'll share that information. But make sure you join us for that conversation on Saturday. Big shout outs to our friend Robert Williams and the rest of that celebration committee team for putting such a conversation together. But
Absolutely.
why is Juneteenth so important? I'm seeing corporations now saying that we will, Nike, NFL, a few others are saying we are now going to honor Juneteenth as a national holiday. We've had President's Day, we had all these other 4th of July, we had all these other celebrations of oppression and racism and genocide, if you will. Why is it so important that we begin to embrace and understand and celebrate a Juneteenth, Ms. Carey?
I had to answer that in 2014 when I was asked to be a special guest for the Lavaca County, Texas, Hallettsville, Texas, which is my uh, father's home. Uh, they wanted, for the first time, as a city, as a county, they want to celebrate Juneteenth.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you don't get to celebrate Juneteenth without talking about why there needed to be emancipation.
In the first place.
Emancipation, yeah. Emancipation from what? Why? Why should it be celebrated? You know? And I chose not to allow them to utilize me, put me up on a stage for a celebration. No, you're going to celebrate my family. You're going to celebrate my grandmother. You're going to celebrate my grandpa. You're gonna celebrate my here's my grandma's college certificate from Purview in 1911. Here's a
Mm-hmm.
quilt scrap from my great great grandmother. Who was she? Where did she come from? And in that process, I actually learned who my great great grandmother was. I have pictures of her now. But what you're asking is like, how do we go from here? How do we utilize these monuments in the context of the resurrection of our historical memory? We we know we've been rejected because unscientifically, unbiologically, we are not inferior because we have black skin and nappy hair. But where does that come from? Who were we before we were enslaved?
Mm-hmm.
What came with us in the bottom of those ships? Not just the physical body. There was literacy. We were literate to our own culture,
Mm-hmm.
but you
Mm-hmm.
didn't want us to become literate to your culture, to only just worship your God.
Right.
Do what we say. Don't think, just do what we say. But laws are not made to oppress animals. Laws are made to oppress people. That's why you may not read, you may not write, and now we have a whole generation of children who have been miseducated. They haven't only been uneducated,
But
they've also
miseducated.
been miseducated. And the demand that I want is an opportunity to save a generation and leave a footprint. And I can only do that via education, resources, opportunities, money. We need millions of dollars to re-educate our children, to make them useful to society. Education is not a determinant of intelligence. It just enhances intelligence. It makes
Mm-hmm.
your intelligence more useful. We're intelligent people. We're superior people. Look, I take BB King. My husband worked with BB King as his keyboard player for 10 years, and that was an education for me too, because I got to travel a lot.
I'm sure it was.
Yes, but it still sheds light on what I'm doing today. Not to mention that I do
Yeah,
have an extensive international poster exhibit. But here's a man who was born on a Mississippi plantation,
absolutely, absolutely.
Indianola. Here's a man who never had to go to the prison, but found his way up Highway 61 to Memphis and got himself on a radio show, and he was advertising Pepticon, and he could play a guitar, and his uncle was a preacher and all that, and he became a musician. He was at the top of his game when he died. This is a man who could take blues to Palestine, who could take
Yeah,
blues
yeah.
to Toyohashi, Japan, people who don't even know how to speak English. And he
But
let him get going, and they're gonna start moving. I mean, how do so we have black people have the healing, the self-healing power of music, of art, of soul. There's something that we have that helped us to
yeah,
sustain the
yeah,
oppression, to go from the rejection to the
yeah.
resurrection.
To
We're
the
not where
resurrection.
we may not be where we going, but we ain't where we was.
Yeah. Let me ask this last thing. I'm gonna tell you something real quickly. I hate. There's some things that I hate. My mom always tells me, "Hate is a strong word. Don't use that term." Right? And
Yeah, it's
yeah,
strong.
and I mostly don't. But I hate when I see these conversations or the theme of these conversations and panel discussions, and they say, "Where do we go from here?" I think it's the most laziest thing in the world. I think it's so intellectually lazy to just ask. We've been asking that same question for 40 years. Where the hell do we go from here? When people want to talk about the struggle of black folks and civil rights and things, it's so lazy to me, and I think it's awful. And I think folks, so anybody listening thinking of using that term, please don't use that term. Be a little bit, put a little bit more gumption in what you're doing. Well, my last question to y'all, let you go. Uh, are we owed reparations? She said absolutely, and then she cut out. Let's see. Look
That
at.
was because I
Oh,
got
there
a
it is.
call from the
Okay, I was like,
community
wow,
house.
the
No, no,
timing of
no.
that.
Uh,
As we talk about reparations.
uh,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just had to disregard that call. Are we owed reparations? Well, let's just talk about who we are.
Hmm.
Um, and let's put this in within the. I pulled some things out here. Let's put this within the context of Tulsa, Wall Street.
Mhm.
Uh, Give me just a minute here, and I think I can pull this up. So the Native American was there was a process of genocide against Native Americans, and they were not going to be successful oppressing them. So they, through Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand and all of that, they managed to um, start bringing us over here.
Mhm.
Emmett J. Scott, who was Booker T. Washington's executive secretary, he was born in 1873, I believe, but he became a journalist, and he was the only African American in Woodrow Wilson's administration when Woodrow Wilson showed Birth of a Nation in the White House. And then Emmett J. Scott went on to write a book about the things that had happened to African Americans during World War I. We know we were in World War II, but we were also in World War I. And then
Mhm.
in 1915, 50 years past emancipation, he wrote this book called The Red Book of Houston. And these are some of the facts that he itemized. This is who we are. Out of 112 million acres of farmlands across the South, of which 27 million acres have been improved and actually are being cultivated. Negroes own about 2 million acres. Now that gets me excited. That was in 1915.
Excited in
Um,
what way?
that is the amount of land that we once had available to us, that we once owned. Um, Maybe not even 10% of that now. And then he said about education. Um, After 50 years of freedom, the 10 million Negroes in the United States have accumulated over $700 million worth of property, which is about $350 per family. And in 1915, some 70% of Negroes have some education in books. You think white folks wanted that to continue?
Absolutely not.
All right, then, 1915, where were Black Wall Street was 1921.
Yeah.
Jesse Washington was brutally lynched in 1916. The Slocum massacre, about which very few people know, took place in Texas, and about 200 people were murdered. 1910. See, this whole back to your original premise about asking about the Confederate monuments. I mean, we're talking here almost 50 years after the Civil War is supposed to be over. And these sons of Confederate veterans and daughters of the Confederacy, they gotta uphold their own power. Remember, these were their loved ones. They loved these people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
These were their heroes. They took the Civil War. What did it do? It took away their power to to uh, to enslave us.
Yeah.
We were the workers. Don't ever let anyone say that after slavery we didn't have any skills. We
We
were
had all
doing
the.
everything.
Yeah, I would say we had all the skills,
I mean, we had all
right?
the skills. That's when the white unions began to be organized in the North. The first American labor unions were organized in the North, so that when we started going up there, they would have power over us, and we would not be such a terrible, what do you call it, competition
Right.
between
To their power.
labor
And,
competition.
and you can argue that now that Black folks are even rising up in the last several weeks in a greater way that we've seen, but you also see the backlash coming from a lot of groups because their power is slowly relinquishing. Their power is eroding. The ways in which that they have oppressed us recently, like you said, it went from slave patrols to black codes to Jim Crow. Now it's James Crow ESQ because they put on a suit and they disguise it
I love it.
a bit now. And so that is what you're seeing across this country, that people are white folks are angry. Who are these Negroes to rise up and to speak up for themselves and to organize in such a way for their liberation and to push back against the status quo and to challenge white supremacy as to what it is, white supremacy in a way to keep folks enslaved and white folks in power, you know.
Yes, it's a policy issue. And what we have to try to effect is not only voting rights, but then legislation. You
Yeah,
know, it's
yeah.
like the Emancipation National Historic Trail that was signed by the president on January the 27th. And yesterday we had that bike ride. But people were so hungry for it. I had to quit telling people about it because they want to know if they can go, and I'm like, it's private and you can't go because it's not public and blah blah blah. But people were so excited because we must strike while
The
the
iron is
iron
hot.
is hot here,
While the
in
skillet is
terms
hot.
of in terms of unifying like minds for empowerment. And when I say like minds, I'm not talking about just black minds. I mean, it's going to take more than black minds to change this country. You see, legislation doesn't change people's minds.
All right, then change
Or
hearts.
we would have been, we would have been free with the 13th Amendment, the 14th and the 15th Amendment, and it's still not free. You know, so what we have, ultimately, what we have to do is to develop programs and demand the money for the 400th Commission didn't even have any money.
Demand the money. Demand the money.
Demand the money. Don't let somebody tell you no.
I'm gonna say this. Yeah. I don't. Yeah. We aren't raising the money. We aren't black folk. We ain't raising money. And I'll say this, because I work in politics. We ain't raising no money. We're not raising any money. He who raises the money, he who accumulates wealth, that community that accumulates wealth in terms of utilizing their power toward their liberation, gets what it is that they want. We see all these other communities pooling their resources, raising their money, and they can get politicians to move and companies to move in their favor, but we ain't raising no money. And so I So I have an idea. I have an idea that I've come up with. I'll share it with our viewers and listeners in a few weeks in terms of how we can build our power through raising money. But let me ask this last question. I'll let you go. Last question. And thank you so much for joining us today and making time to talk about this. And you and I will talk more as this week progresses. Damien Jones podcast, talking with
I'm supposed to be learning how to make an infographic today.
You know what?
So I can get away from PowerPoints, but I know what to do with a PowerPoint.
Go call a young person and tell them to do it for you.
Yeah.
But Naomi Carrier, from executive director from the Texas Center for African American Living History. We saw a few years ago the Confederate statues at the Texas Capitol removed. If there was one person, black person, that you would like to see on a monument at the Texas Capitol, who would that be?
That's an interesting question.
I got you on here.
You got me. You got me there. Let me see. Let me come up with something. Well, I did mention, and I've seen the new statue at the Texas Capitol. It's beautiful. I've had myself photographed with several other people when we were lobbying at the legislature last year. You know what? I can tell you right now who.
There you go. I know you. The light just went off in your head.
And I don't care if she doesn't have a name. I would like to see a black school teacher. Because there were in this state 530 Rosenwald schools erected from the collaboration between Booker T. Washington and Julius Rosenwald, who was the president of Sears Roebuck in Chicago. And Julius Rosenwald was Jewish, but they had this collaboration that resulted in 5,300 schools in rural areas for African American children. And my parents met at one of those schools. In fact, my parents met at the first Rosenwald school in Texas. Now, I have not checked that documentation out, but PowerPoint was a high school in Kendleton, Texas, 50 miles from here, where my parents met, and they both had to travel there from out of town. In fact, my mother was almost 200 or 300 miles, and my mother and father got married, and then years later, I found myself working at the George Ranch Historical Park, interpreting slave stories. Duh. And again, with the Convict Leasing Labor Project, writing all these stories about the Sugarland 95, and what I want, what I will not be, before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave. I want that Arcola plantation, what's left of it, because I want it to become an interpretive center for reconciliation and healing.
You know what? Have you been to that plantation in Louisiana, right outside New Orleans? I think they turned it into a museum now. I went several years ago, and the slave quarters were still there. The plantation. I mean, it's beautiful, but everything is still intact. And I went there, and it was just
I
a
think you're
jarring
talking about
experience.
the Whitty Museum.
It's right outside New Orleans. I can't think of the particular
Oh.
name of it. Right outside New Orleans, though. But anywho, we'll talk more about that. But you said a black teacher. You think a black teacher should be on display in front of the
I would
Texas
like for
Capitol?
it to be somebody who doesn't have no name. You know why? Because there's too many of us who ain't got no name, who ain't nobody, still being called by the N-word.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I can't think of, I mean, I know there are a lot of important people. Annie Mae McDade Prosper Hunt, who I do a musical about. She but you see, and this is where I think black people lose it sometimes. They only have reverence and respect for somebody who has money, or for somebody who has reached some level of class, or
Mm.
you know, don't forget where you come from.
You sound like my mama. You
I,
like my
I
mama.
probably know your mama. I might not know. I might not know her in person, but
Hey, you
she
know
and
what's
me
funny?
got something in common.
You know what's funny? As I say that, she just
What?
jumped on the broadcast. I just said she just jumped on the broadcast. Hey, mom, how are you?
Hey, mama. Yeah,
So
mama,
so
he over here messing with me.
Oh my goodness! But let's get out of here. And again, thank you so much for this valuable information, folks. If you've enjoyed this conversation with Miss Carrier, give us a like right now, or just tell Miss Carrier in the comments. Thank you for the information. As well, this has been eye opening. This has been beautiful. This is a great start for our Juneteenth celebration.
Isn't it
Uh,
though?
Conversation. Where can folks get in touch with you and find you, and if they want to invite you to a
Well,
conversation at their place of socialization or business?
I do have a Facebook uh, presence, and I have an Instagram. My website is takala.org. It's T is in Texas, C is in Center, A is in African American, LH in Living History.org. That's my nonprofit. My book can be purchased. Hold on, and I'll show you the front of it. The cover was done by uh, Ted Ellis, who is a Texas artist. Well, he's from New Orleans, but that I respect. You can buy my book on Amazon because they've already sold out. So I don't
Oh,
have any
really?
copies that I can sell anybody. And you can buy this book on Amazon. I am Annie Mae. 33 years ago, when I met Ruth Weingarten, the publisher of this book right here, she said to a group of us, I wish somebody would take my book and make it into a musical. And I said, well, pick me, I can do that. But what I learned from that experience that I'm still reminded about, if you're going to be successful, it's about when opportunity meets preparation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Success is when opportunity meets preparation. I was
Mm-hmm.
already making up songs and reading Black history and all of that. But when I got through with I Am Annie Mae, I became a composer and a playwright.
Listen,
When I
okay,
got a
listen.
master's degree at the age of what, 64, 65, I'm like, this is what
Oh,
somebody else thinks I need.
oh my
I'm just
goodness.
gonna be playing the piano and do what I've always done.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Education is only to refine your intelligence. And don't take all the music and theater and culture out of our Black high school, and then want to say that the students are wild. What did you
Mm-hmm.
give them to become acculturated? You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
for 6 years I did a performing and visual arts workshop. I still have the website. P, PVAW, something like that. But the thing about it is, who's going to culturate our children? Who's going to tell them that you don't just have to know rap music. Do you know what a field call is? Do, do you know any blues music, or you just gonna give it all to the white folks? Because they got it, bro. I said right there in Washington, away from BBT.
Let's get out of here. I put the link to your website.
I can't hear you now.
You can't hear me anymore?
Oh, no wonder.
See, oh, you took your headphones out. See, you talking about you can't hear me. So I put the link
from the typewriter age.
I'm not gonna hold that against you. So I put the link to your website down in the comments, and also put the link to your book also down in the comments so people can access that as well. But thank you so much for everything you do. Thank you for your leadership as well. Thank you for sharing this rich history with us as well. This is a great start to my day. I'm so thankful for you. And you and I will talk again Thursday or Saturday for our conversation, rejection to resurrection, and we'll talk more about these things. But Ms. Naomi Carrier, the Executive Director from the Texas Center for African American Living History. Thank you so much. And folks, thank you for tuning in today. Remember to take that survey as well. I want to know what you think about these elections. Take that survey. You enter to win $50 as well. And I hope y'all like my new background as well as we try to make America better and better and better and more equitable for all people. But until next time, this is the Damien Jones Podcast. And remember to live your life with intensity, integrity, and intelligence. This is the Damien Jones Podcast.
Thank you, dear.